Fred Pohl IV is proud to be presenting his fifth Rant and Rave this evening. He's embarrassed to have absolutely nothing to promote. Ladies and gentlemen, Frederick Pohl IV.
Anatomy of an embarrassment. Embarrassment is an elusive concept somewhere between astonishment and shame. What you find embarrassing says a lot about your cultural background. In her study of childhood in Samoa, anthropologist Margaret Mead found little that could be called embarrassment. Harmony between the generations, a cooperative economy, and a laid-back attitude towards sex probably had something to do with it. I'm from a land called New Jersey, a largely Italian and Irish-American province south of New York. Things that are embarrassing there include having uncut grass, originally being from anywhere else, and not being Catholic. Things that are not embarrassing include having an uncle doing 20 years in Allenwood on a RICO conviction and living on a bogus disability claim. I reached the age of 5 without suffering major embarrassment. Then I went to school. My 7th grade science project was a memorable moment of embarrassment. I presented all of my carefully falsified research about the effects of ultraviolet light on the fruit fly with my fly down. My Sears and Roebuck's briefs didn't let me down, but it caused much hilarity. Plus, it got out of the class into the lunchroom. Luckily, a classmate popped an inopportune boner in the boys' locker room the next day, earning the nickname of Boing and taking the heat off of me. High school was a kaleidoscope of embarrassment for me, as it is for many people. Luckily, most of that's only remembered at class reunions I'll never go to. But one thing from that time still does embarrass me. My senior yearbook picture features me wearing a burgundy double knit suit and paisley bow tie that just screams chess club. I might have been a famous person, but for the fear that someone might dredge that up. Then college. You might have guessed that I studied anthropology in college, and embarrassment played a role in that too. I began intending to major in Russian language. Yeah. At the end of one semester, my teacher, or Uchitelnitsa, was telling us what to expect in Russian 202. When she said in her sexy Ukrainian accent that we should plan on much more oral practice, I somehow pictured she was talking about oral sex, and I fell out laughing. It turned into one of those hysterical, uncontrollable things where the more I laughed, the more embarrassed I got, etc., etc. Luckily, it was a very small class and a very large campus, so I never saw any of those people again after switching over to anthropology. I came to Los Angeles for my field work. Like the trickster shamans of tribal societies, there are those in our society for whom embarrassment is a verb and not an embarrassed is a verb and not an adjective. One of these people was my late father-in-law, legendary Hollywood publicist Frank Lieberman. He knew everyone from silent pictures on and could talk to anyone about anything. He was such a good talker, sometimes he didn't know when to stop. I was lucky that he introduced me to many of the actors I loved from my formative TV years, like Robert Reed, Karen Valentine, Suzanne Plachette. At another party, he introduced me to Milton Berle. Though Uncle Milty was before my time, it was still cool to hear him say, "Hello, Freddie," in that famous voice, and to meet the man rumored to have Hollywood's largest dick. As we walked away, Frank leaned in and said, his new wife whacks him off under the table in all the best restaurants in town. A little embarrassing, but interesting to know, and no one else heard. Once at a Casting Society of America awards ceremony where my wife, his daughter, was a nominee, Frank introduced me to pioneering agent Iris Burton. Iris had practically invented kids agenting as a business, as a specialty, and had handled everyone from Drew Barrymore to the Olsen twins. She had discovered River Phoenix, whose tragic death was still a fairly recent phenomenon at the time. The conversation with Iris passed the 2-minute mark and began to ebb, as such cocktail chat does. It's a natural time to move on and talk to someone else, if you can do it without being too obvious. But Frank plugged on. "So, Iris," he said, "you still represent the rest of the Phoenix kids, right?" Well, it might have gone unnoticed if she hadn't cried, and then everyone noticed, and waves of embarrassment propagated outwards in rings. Frank was beyond embarrassment into mortification, which is a different topic. In his defense, it was, however, an honest question and an attempt to put a positive spin on a difficult topic. It could be the golden age of embarrassment is behind us. I feel like I'm embarrassing myself less these days, or maybe I'm concentrating it in my auditions. Certainly we can't depend on the next generation to keep up the embarrassment tradition. The overshare is much more of a problem with millennials. Tweeting your miscarriage may appall some people, but hey, it saves actually having to tell people. And if you see the stuff they tweet, Instagram, and Vine, you have to conclude people aren't embarrassed by much now. A YouTube search of the phrase, "I pooped my pants," yields approximately 49,000 hits. I don't know if these people who post are actually not embarrassed, if they're just going for attention, or if they're sharing to get support. They do get a lot of support from other pants poopers, which must lessen the embarrassment. If embarrassment is lessening, it's bad for comedy, but it's got to be good for society. Taking the secrecy away from formerly hidden stuff hopefully gives the millennials a lot less to be embarrassed about. Or maybe it's just a cultural thing and their tribe just has different standards for what's embarrassing, like having cable TV or an AOL email address.